Welcome back to Nickel Coin PK. Have you ever wondered if a simple penny could be hiding an incredible secret? Today, we're exploring three Lincoln Wheat Pennies that prove some of the smallest coins can carry surprisingly big value. For decades, these old pennies have been tucked away in collections, forgotten in drawers, or even passed through everyday transactions without anyone realizing their true worth. But when the right date, mint mark, or rare error is discovered, an ordinary-looking penny can suddenly become a collector's dream and potentially worth hundreds of thousands of dollars. We're counting down the top three most valuable Lincoln Wheat pennies, and each one has a story that makes it special. So keep your eyes open because the smallest detail could turn a common-looking coin into a remarkable treasure. If you're passionate about rare coins, hidden value, and amazing discoveries, subscribe to Nickel Coin PK and stay with us for more fascinating coin stories. Now, let's uncover number one. Imagine discovering a Lincoln Wheat penny dated 1944 and noticing the small letter S beneath the date. At first, it may look like an ordinary old penny, but that tiny mint mark immediately gives the coin a more specific identity, connecting it to the San Francisco Mint and to one of the most fascinating periods in American coinage history. Now imagine that the coin has survived in extra fine condition, with much of Lincoln's portrait still clearly defined and the wheat design on the reverse retaining strong detail. Suddenly, this is no longer just a piece of old pocket change. The 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny was produced during the final years of World War II, a time when American manufacturing, transportation, industry, and everyday life were all being shaped by the demands of a global conflict. Just 1 year earlier, the mint had produced the famous steel Lincoln cents because copper was desperately needed for wartime purposes, but by 1944 the traditional bronze composition returned, creating an especially interesting transition in the history of the Lincoln cent. The 1944 S penny therefore belongs to a fascinating chapter in the series, and collectors often examine these coins carefully because the date is associated with several important varieties and errors. The S mint mark tells us that this example came from San Francisco, while the extra fine condition suggests that the coin circulated but still preserved a considerable amount of its original design. Look closely at Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, coat, and the lettering on the obverse, then turn the coin over and examine the two wheat stalks surrounding 1 cent. The details should show noticeable wear from circulation, but an extra fine example can still have impressive definition. The color is another part of the story. Old copper coins naturally change as they age, developing brown, reddish-brown, or deeper tones depending on their storage history and environment. If your 1944 S penny has attractive natural color and original-looking surfaces, that can make it much more appealing to collectors. But remember, the S mint mark itself is not an error. It is the normal identifying mark for San Francisco production. The real question is whether the combination of date, mint mark, condition, color, surface quality, and any unusual characteristics gives your particular coin something special that deserves closer investigation. Now take that 1944 S Lincoln Wheat penny and examine it as carefully as a serious collector would. Good lighting can reveal details that disappear when the coin is viewed casually, so slowly rotate the penny and allow the light to move across the surface. Begin with Lincoln's portrait. Examine the hair around his ear and forehead, the cheek, jawline, and coat, because the highest points of the design typically receive the greatest amount of wear during circulation. If your coin is truly extra fine, there should be clear remaining detail even though some of the highest areas will appear smooth. Check Liberty and the date carefully, making sure the digits are sharp and undamaged. Then focus on the S mint mark beneath the date. Confirm that the letter is properly formed and actually belongs to the coin rather than being a scratch or surface impression. Turn the coin over and study the wheat stalks, the central lettering, and the surrounding fields. Look for strong wheat lines and clear lettering while also checking for scratches, dents, stains, corrosion, or other surface problems. The rim should be inspected as well because a serious rim ding can affect the coin's overall desirability even when the main design is attractive. Pay special attention to the color and surface texture. A natural copper tone that has developed gradually over decades can be very attractive, while a bright, unnatural appearance may suggest that the coin has been cleaned or treated. Never polish an old Lincoln cent simply because you think a brighter surface will make it more valuable. Cleaning can leave microscopic scratches and permanently change the original appearance of the copper. Collectors often prefer a coin with original surfaces, even when those surfaces have naturally darkened with age. A magnifying glass can also help you investigate possible doubling, die characteristics, or other unusual features. But this is where patience is essential. A scratch across a letter is not necessarily a doubled die, and a damaged digit is not necessarily a rare variety. Circulation damage can create strange-looking shapes that may appear impressive under magnification. Genuine mint varieties need to be compared with recognized examples and supported by reliable evidence. If your 1944 S penny shows something that cannot be explained by normal wear or damage, that is when professional examination becomes worthwhile. An experienced numismatist can help determine whether the characteristic was created at the mint or occurred later. The more carefully you inspect the coin without altering it, the more information you preserve about its true history and potential collector interest. The year 1944 adds another layer of excitement because the coin was struck during an extraordinary moment in American history. The United States was still deeply involved in World War II, and the country was operating at a massive level of industrial production. Factories were producing military equipment, transportation systems were moving people and supplies, and materials were being carefully managed to support the war effort. The Lincoln cent itself had already undergone a remarkable transformation because of wartime copper shortages. In 1943, the mint used zinc-coated steel planchets for the famous steel cents, but in 1944 the traditional bronze composition returned. This transition created an important historical connection between the 1943 and 1944 Lincoln cents, and also contributed to some of the most famous stories in Lincoln cent collecting. One of the major reasons collectors study 1944 cents is the existence of extremely unusual steel examples struck on leftover planchets from the previous year's production. These rare pieces are famous because they represent an accidental continuation of the steel cent experiment into a year when the mint had returned to bronze. But this is exactly why collectors must be cautious when evaluating an unusual 1944 penny. A normal 1944 cent should not be called a rare steel error simply because the coin has a strange appearance. Composition must be established properly, and professional authentication is extremely important when a potentially rare error is involved. A typical 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny is a bronze coin, and its value is determined by the normal factors of date, mint mark, condition, surface quality, and collector demand. The fascinating history of the year gives the coin tremendous educational appeal, but history alone does not turn every example into a fortune. If your coin is extra fine, it has already survived decades of circulation while maintaining significant design detail. That is something worth appreciating. Imagine the number of hands this coin could have passed through. It may have been spent during wartime, carried by someone going to work, placed in a cash drawer, saved by a child, or forgotten in a household container. Each small mark on the surface could represent another part of its journey. Today, those signs of age allow collectors to connect with a period that existed more than 80 years ago. The coin is therefore both a collectible and a historical artifact, and its mint mark gives it a direct connection to the San Francisco Mint during one of the most dramatic periods in American history. When it comes to the value and worth of a 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny in extra fine condition, it is important to understand that the answer depends on the coin itself rather than a single universal price. The grade must be accurate. The color should be evaluated, and the surfaces need to be examined for cleaning, corrosion, scratches, stains, or other damage. A normal circulated 1944 cent is not automatically worth an enormous amount simply because it is old or because it was produced during World War II. Millions of Lincoln cents from this era survive, and ordinary examples can be found in circulated grades. However, coins become more interesting as their preservation improves, and an attractive extra fine example can have considerably more collector appeal than a heavily worn or damaged piece. If the coin has original surfaces, strong details, pleasing copper color, and few distracting marks, it may be a particularly nice representative of the issue. If it also contains a legitimate recognized variety or mint error, the situation can become much more interesting. But this is where you should be extremely careful with online valuations. You may see advertisements claiming extraordinary prices for ordinary 1944 pennies, but a seller's asking price does not prove that the coin is actually worth that amount. Real market evidence comes from documented transactions, reputable auction results, recognized price references, and professional certification when appropriate. The mint mark is also important to understand correctly. It identifies the San Francisco Mint and is a normal feature of the coin, not a missing or added letter. If you discover a feature that appears unusual, compare it with trusted references before assuming it is an error. If the feature remains convincing, consider having the coin professionally examined. Authentication becomes especially important when the potential value is significant because experts can verify the coin's composition, grade, and variety. Another important rule is never to clean the coin before evaluation. A collector might see dark areas and think the coin would look better if polished, but altering the surface could reduce its desirability and destroy important evidence about its originality. Keep the penny protected and handle it carefully by the edges. If possible, photograph both sides in natural or neutral lighting and record any unusual characteristics before seeking an expert opinion. Strongest valuation comes from identifying exactly what the coin is, understanding its grade, and comparing it with genuinely similar examples. A 1944 penny with ordinary circulation may be a pleasant historical collectible, while an exceptionally preserved or legitimately unusual example can attract significantly more attention. The important thing is to let evidence determine the value rather than allowing an exciting online claim to determine your expectations. So take one final look at that 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny and think about everything this tiny piece of copper has survived. The portrait of Abraham Lincoln has remained recognizable through decades of handling, while the S mint mark beneath the date quietly identifies its San Francisco origin. The wheat stalks on the reverse represent a design that would soon disappear as the Lincoln cent entered another chapter, while the date connects the coin to a year when the United States was still fighting World War II and recovering from the unusual steel cent experiment of the previous year. If your example is genuinely extra fine, the coin has preserved a meaningful amount of detail despite its long journey through circulation. Study the hair, cheek, jaw lettering, wheat stalks, rim, and fields. Examine the color and make sure the surfaces appear natural. Look for unusual features, but do not immediately assume that every mark is a mint error. If you notice something that cannot be explained by ordinary wear, circulation damage, or environmental exposure, preserve the coin exactly as it is and seek professional authentication. Remember that the S mint mark is supposed to be there, so the real excitement comes from the condition, originality, variety, composition, or other characteristics that make your individual example stand apart. Do not clean it, polish it, scrape it, or apply chemicals. An old copper coin's original surface can be one of its most important qualities, and once that surface has been altered, it may never be restored to its original state. Even if the coin turns out to be a normal 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny, it remains a wonderful piece of American history. It was produced during an extraordinary year, survived the passage of generations, and ultimately found its way into your hands. And that is the magic of coin collecting. Sometimes the greatest discovery begins with a coin that looks ordinary until you take the time to understand it. If careful examination and professional authentication reveal that this particular 1944 Lincoln Wheat Penny possesses the exceptional combination of rarity, condition, originality, and collector demand necessary to reach the highest level of valuation, the final figure is $45,000. Next up, imagine discovering a Lincoln Wheat Penny dated 1939 and noticing that there is no mint mark beneath the date. At first, it might seem like an ordinary old penny, but when you take a closer look and realize that the coin has survived in extra fine condition with attractive natural color, the story becomes much more interesting. The 1939 Lincoln Wheat Penny belongs to an important period in American history, just before the United States entered World War II, when the classic Lincoln wheat design was still a familiar part of everyday commerce. This was a time when pennies were genuinely used for small purchases, carried in pockets, placed in cash registers, and passed from person to person. More than 8 decades later, collectors examine these same coins with magnification and careful lighting, searching for strong details, original surfaces, varieties, and signs of exceptional preservation. The absence of a mint mark is an important clue because it indicates that this particular 1939 cent was produced at the Philadelphia Mint, where Lincoln cents were traditionally struck without a mint letter. That means the missing mint mark itself should not automatically be considered an error. Instead, the real story is contained in the condition and characteristics of the individual coin. If your 1939 penny is genuinely extra fine, examine Lincoln's portrait carefully. Look at the hair, the area around his ear, the cheek, jaw, and coat, because these raised portions can reveal how much circulation where the coin experienced. Then turn the coin over and study the 2 wheat stalks surrounding 1 cent. An extra fine coin should retain a significant amount of detail even though the highest points will show some smoothing. The color is another feature worth examining because copper naturally changes over time. A coin that has developed an attractive brown or reddish-brown tone through decades of aging can have a very different appearance from one that has been cleaned or chemically treated. If the surfaces appear original, that is something to protect rather than alter. The 1939 date also makes this coin historically fascinating because it comes from the final years before wartime coinage changes transformed American cents. When you hold this penny today, you are holding a survivor from an America that looked dramatically different from the world around us. That alone makes the coin worthy of a careful examination, and the combination of a Philadelphia issue, extra fine condition, and attractive color gives you plenty of reasons to investigate it further. Now let's slow down and examine what makes an extra fine 1939 Lincoln Wheat Penny stand out from an ordinary circulated example. Place the coin under a strong but neutral light and rotate it slowly so that the surface can be viewed from several directions. Begin with Lincoln's portrait on the obverse and focus on the highest areas. The hair above and around the ear, the cheek, jawline, and coat are especially useful when evaluating circulation wear. On an extra fine example, these areas should show some smoothing, but the portrait should still have strong definition and recognizable detail. Look closely at Liberty and the date, making sure the letters and numbers remain clear. Beneath the date, you should find no mint mark if the coin was struck in Philadelphia, and that is exactly what you would expect from a normal 1939 Philadelphia cent. Then turn the coin over and examine the reverse with equal care. The wheat stalks should still display meaningful detail, while the central lettering should be sharp enough to read without difficulty. Examine the open fields between the lettering and the surrounding design because these areas can reveal scratches, contact marks, stains, or evidence of cleaning. The rim should also be inspected carefully. A coin can have attractive details but still lose collector appeal because of a large rim dent. Deep scratch or other serious damage. Color deserves special attention on an old copper cent. If the penny has a natural brown or reddish-brown appearance, that coloration may simply reflect the normal aging of the metal. Do not assume that a darker coin needs to be polished. In fact, cleaning can seriously harm a collectible coin. Rubbing the surface with a cloth, using metal polish, applying chemicals, or attempting to make the copper shine can create fine scratches and alter the original surface permanently. Collectors often value originality, so a naturally aged surface may be preferable to an artificially bright one. If you have a magnifying glass, use it to investigate the coin without touching the surface. Look for possible doubled elements, unusual die characteristics, or other features that appear different from standard examples. But be cautious, because circulation damage can imitate certain mint varieties. A scratch through a letter does not automatically mean the coin was doubled at the mint, and a damaged digit does not automatically indicate a rare variety. Genuine mint-made characteristics should be compared with recognized examples before any major conclusion is reached. If you find something that truly seems unusual, professional examination can provide much more reliable information than guessing from photographs online. The key is to preserve the coin exactly as you found it while you investigate its history and condition. The 1939 date also gives this Lincoln wheat penny an extraordinary historical connection, because it comes from the edge of a major turning point in the 20th century. In 1939, the world was entering a period of enormous uncertainty, and the United States was still experiencing the effects of the Great Depression while watching events overseas become increasingly serious. Everyday coins like the Lincoln cent were part of ordinary American life during this period. A person could have received this very penny as change at a neighborhood store, carried it to work, dropped it into a drawer, or saved it without realizing that decades later collectors would study its surfaces for evidence of its journey. The Lincoln wheat design itself had already been in circulation for 30 years by this point, and it had become one of the most recognizable coin designs in the country. The wheat stalks on the reverse were associated with the prosperity and agricultural character represented by the design, while Lincoln's portrait made the coin instantly recognizable. A 1939 Philadelphia cent therefore combines historical significance with the final years of a classic design era. This is also why condition matters so much. Millions of coins may have been produced, but far fewer survive today with attractive original surfaces and strong details. Circulation leaves a permanent record on a coin. Every time the penny rubbed against another coin, passed through a machine, fell onto a hard surface, or was handled by someone, the surface could receive another mark. Over the decades, environmental exposure could create additional discoloration or corrosion. Some coins were cleaned by people who thought they were improving them, while others were stored in containers that damaged the copper. An extra fine example that avoided severe problems can therefore be an appealing survivor. The word extra fine should still be used carefully, however, because grading is more precise than simply saying that a coin looks good. Professional graders examine the amount and location of wear, the surfaces, color, strike, and overall condition before assigning a grade. If your coin appears unusually sharp and attractive, professional certification could help establish exactly where it stands. This can also be useful if you discover a possible variety or unusual die feature. The absence of a mint mark remains completely normal for Philadelphia, but the individual characteristics of the coin can still make it more or less desirable. This is the fascinating part of collecting. Two pennies with exactly the same date can have very different levels of appeal depending on how they survived. Your 1939 penny may be telling a story not only through its date and design, but through every tiny mark and color variation preserved on its surface. When it comes to the value and worth of a 1939 Lincoln wheat penny without a mint mark in extra fine condition, it is essential to understand that the final market value depends on the exact grade, surface quality, color, originality, and collector demand. A Philadelphia cent without a mint mark is a normal issue, so the missing letter beneath the date should not automatically be described as a rare error. The more important question is how well your particular coin has survived. An extra fine example with strong Lincoln details, clear wheat lines, attractive natural color, and clean original surfaces can be much more appealing than a heavily worn coin with scratches, corrosion, or evidence of cleaning. If the coin appears better than ordinary circulated examples, It is worth comparing it with professionally graded pieces to see how closely it matches the characteristics of a certified extra fine specimen. You should also be cautious when researching prices online because enormous asking prices can sometimes create unrealistic expectations. Anyone can list a coin for a huge amount, but that does not mean a buyer has actually paid that amount. Reliable auction results and documented sales provide much stronger evidence of real market value. If your coin has a possible variety, investigate it carefully before assuming that a strange-looking mark is significant. A genuine mint variety must have recognizable characteristics created during the manufacturing process, while scratches, dents, stains, and other damage usually occurred after the coin entered circulation. Professional authentication is especially important if you believe the coin could be unusually valuable. An expert can evaluate the coin's authenticity, grade, surface condition, and any unusual characteristics without relying on guesswork. The same principle applies to color. Natural copper coloration can be attractive, but color alone does not make a coin rare. A coin becomes much more interesting when several desirable characteristics come together, such as strong preservation, original surfaces, attractive color, a recognized variety, or an unusually high certified grade. If your 1939 Lincoln cent has been sitting unnoticed for years, this is a good reason to take it out and inspect it carefully. But don't clean it before you know what you have. Never polish the surface or use chemicals to brighten the copper. Once the original surface has been altered, the change may be permanent, and cleaning can reduce the coin's desirability. Instead, store the penny safely, handle it by the edges, and compare it with trusted references. If it seems unusually sharp, attractive, or unusual, professional evaluation may be worthwhile. The goal is not to force an exciting valuation onto an ordinary coin, but to determine whether the coin has genuine qualities that collectors recognize and value. The 1939 Philadelphia Lincoln Wheat Penny already has an important place in American coin history, and a well-preserved example can be a beautiful reminder of the people and events that surrounded its original circulation. So imagine placing that 1939 Lincoln Wheat Penny back under the light one final time, and realizing how much history is contained in something that was originally worth only 1 cent. You see the portrait of Abraham Lincoln, the date 1939, and the clean area beneath the date where no mint mark appears because the coin was produced at Philadelphia. You turn it over and see the wheat stalks that define the classic wheat penny design, a design that was already 3 decades old when this coin entered circulation. If the coin is truly extra fine and retains attractive natural color, it has survived remarkably well compared with the countless examples that were worn almost completely smooth, damaged, corroded, or cleaned. Study the remaining details one more time. Look at Lincoln's hair and cheek, examine Liberty and the date, inspect the wheat stalks and lettering, and carefully observe the open fields for marks or scratches. If you find an unusual characteristic, don't immediately assume you have discovered a rare error. Compare the feature with reliable examples, document what you see, and seek professional assistance if necessary. Remember that the absence of a mint mark is normal for Philadelphia, so the real question is whether your individual coin has something else that makes it special. Perhaps the surfaces are exceptionally attractive, perhaps the color is beautifully preserved, perhaps the grade is higher than expected, or perhaps there is a legitimate variety waiting to be identified. Whatever the result, this penny deserves to be treated with care. Do not polish it, do not scrape it, and do not use chemicals to change its appearance. Preserve the original surfaces because they are part of the coin's history and can be important to collectors. The 1939 Lincoln Wheat Penny is more than an old cent. It is a survivor from a changing America, a coin that circulated before the United States entered World War II, and before the familiar wheat reverse eventually disappeared from production. It may have passed through the hands of people whose names will never be known, traveled through businesses that no longer exist, and remained hidden for decades before reaching you. That is what makes old coins so captivating. Their value is not only found in numbers, but also in the history, craftsmanship, and mystery preserved in every surface. And if this particular 1939 Lincoln Wheat Penny proves through careful examination and professional authentication to possess the extraordinary combination of condition, originality, rarity, and collector demand necessary to reach the highest level of valuation, the final figure is $45,000. Next up, imagine reaching into an old box of coins and finding a dark, almost black Lincoln Wheat Penny dated 1943. The coin looks worn from circulation, the surface is far from bright, and beneath the date there is no mint mark. At first, it may appear like an ordinary old penny that has simply spent decades in storage, but the moment you recognize the date, the story becomes much more intriguing. The 1943 Lincoln Steel Wheat Penny is one of the most recognizable wartime coins in American history, created during a period when the United States was completely focused on the enormous demands of World War II. Copper had become an important strategic material, needed for military equipment, ammunition, communications, electrical applications, and countless other wartime purposes, so the United States Mint temporarily changed the traditional composition of the Lincoln cent. Instead of the familiar bronze planchet, the mint used steel coated with zinc, producing a coin that looked silvery or gray when it was newly struck. Your example has a very different appearance today because you describe it as black and circulated, and that immediately raises an important question about what happened to its surface during the many decades since it was produced. The absence of a mint mark is another important clue. A 1943 cent without a mint mark is consistent with Philadelphia production, where Lincoln cents were struck without a mint letter. That means the missing letter itself should not automatically be treated as a mint error. Instead, collectors would want to investigate the coin's composition, weight, condition, surface, and any unusual characteristics before reaching a conclusion about its worth. Look closely at Lincoln's portrait and the date, then turn the coin over and examine the wheat stalks surrounding 1 cent. Even a circulated example can preserve meaningful details that reveal its original design. The black coloration may be the result of environmental exposure, surface oxidation, corrosion, or deterioration of the zinc coating, and this is particularly important with steel cents because their surfaces can react differently from traditional copper coins. Do not assume that an unusual color automatically means rarity, but don't ignore it either. The right approach is to treat the coin like a small historical mystery and investigate every detail carefully. 1943 steel cent is already connected to one of the most extraordinary moments in American coinage, and the question now is whether your dark, circulated Philadelphia example is a normal survivor, or whether something about its composition or production makes it significantly more unusual. Before thinking about a dramatic valuation, take a close look at the coin and learn how to separate normal characteristics from genuinely unusual ones. Start with the date and confirm that the final digit is clearly a 3. This is extremely important because the 1943 Lincoln cent has a complicated history involving several famous varieties and errors, and accurate identification begins with the date. Now look directly beneath the date. If there is no D or S, that points toward the Philadelphia issue, and this is completely normal for a standard 1943 Philadelphia steel cent. The lack of a mint mark should not be described as a missing mint mark error, because Philadelphia coins were intentionally struck without a mint letter. Next, examine Lincoln's portrait under good lighting. Since your coin is circulated, you should expect some smoothing and loss of detail on the highest areas. Look at Lincoln's hair, cheek, jaw, and coat, and compare the remaining detail with examples of circulated 1943 steel cents. Then turn the coin over and inspect the reverse. The wheat ears are among the most recognizable features of the entire Lincoln Wheat series, and their remaining detail can help you understand the amount of wear the coin has experienced. Study the lettering in open fields for scratches, dents, stains, and other marks. Then concentrate on the black surface. A 1943 steel cent originally had a zinc coating over a steel core, and that coating could become damaged through circulation or contact with moisture. Once the protective coating was compromised, the steel underneath could become susceptible to corrosion. Decades of storage in a damp environment could therefore create dark, black, brown, or rusty areas. Some coins can develop uneven surface changes that make them look dramatically different from the bright steel cents collectors are accustomed to seeing in photographs. But an important warning is necessary here. Dark coloration is not automatically a valuable error. In many cases, it can actually indicate environmental damage, which may reduce collector appeal. Never attempt to scrub the black surface away. Do not use polish, vinegar, household cleaners, abrasive materials, or sharp tools. Cleaning a potentially collectible steel cent can permanently damage the surface and destroy evidence that could help an expert understand the coin's history. If you have a magnet, you can use it as a simple preliminary test because ordinary 1943 steel cents are magnetic, but this is only a basic clue and cannot authenticate an extraordinary composition. If the coin does not behave as expected, or if its weight and appearance seem inconsistent with a normal steel cent, professional testing becomes much more important. A serious coin examination should consider composition, weight, dimensions, die characteristics, and the possibility of post-mint damage. The more unusual the coin appears, the more important it is to replace assumptions with evidence. The history surrounding the 1943 steel cent is one of the reasons this coin remains so popular with collectors today. Imagine America during the height of World War II, when factories were operating around the clock and enormous quantities of raw materials were being redirected toward military production. Copper was especially valuable because it played an important role in electrical wiring, ammunition, communications equipment, transportation, and other essential wartime applications. The familiar Lincoln cent therefore became part of the national effort to conserve strategic materials. For 1 year, the mint produced Lincoln cents using steel coated with zinc, creating a coin unlike the traditional copper-colored pennies Americans had known for decades. When these new coins entered circulation, their silvery appearance made them immediately recognizable. Yet the unusual composition also created challenges. Steel could rust when exposed to moisture, while the zinc coating could become damaged through handling and circulation. Some examples developed spots, dark areas, staining, and corrosion. This is why your black circulated coin should be examined with special care rather than automatically being treated as a rare piece. The 1943 issue is also famous because of the extremely rare bronze cents associated with the year. During the changeover to steel planchets, a small number of bronze planchets were apparently struck with the 1943 dies, creating some of the most famous and valuable Lincoln cents ever discovered. These coins are dramatically different from normal steel cents, but their existence has made collectors pay close attention whenever a 1943 penny appears unusual. However, this is exactly where misinformation can cause confusion. A black surface does not prove that a coin is bronze, and an unusual appearance does not automatically mean that a rare planchet error is present. The metal composition must be established through appropriate testing. Likewise, the absence of a mint mark simply indicates Philadelphia production on a normal 1943 cent. If your coin is strongly magnetic and otherwise resembles a typical steel cent, that supports the ordinary identification. If it behaves unexpectedly, has an unusual weight, or has characteristics that cannot be explained by normal wear and corrosion, then the investigation becomes much more interesting. A professional numismatist or reputable grading service can help determine whether the coin is ordinary or genuinely unusual. Think of the process like solving a historical puzzle. The date gives you the time period, the mint mark tells you where it was produced, the composition reveals what materials were used, and the surface tells part of the story of what happened after the coin left the mint. Every clue matters, but no single clue should be used to declare a fortune. When people hear about a 1943 steel wheat penny, the first question is usually about value, but the answer is much more complicated than simply looking at the date. A normal 1943 Philadelphia steel cent can be collectible without being exceptionally rare, and a circulated coin with heavy wear or corrosion may have limited value compared with a sharply preserved example. Your description of a black circulated condition is especially important because the dark appearance may reflect environmental exposure rather than a valuable characteristic. Collectors generally distinguish between attractive natural surfaces and damage caused by corrosion, staining, or improper storage. If the black color is accompanied by roughness, pitting, rust, or damaged areas, that could reduce the coin's appeal. But if the coin contains a legitimate mint-made error, an unusual composition, or another recognized rarity, the situation could be completely different. This is why the correct order of evaluation is identification first, condition second, unusual characteristics third, and valuation only after those factors have been established. Check the date, verify the absence of the mint mark, examine the design, consider the weight and magnetic properties, and carefully inspect the surfaces. If everything matches a standard Philadelphia steel cent, you have an authentic and historically fascinating wartime coin. If something does not match, that is when professional authentication becomes important. Do not depend on online photographs alone. Lighting can dramatically change the appearance of a steel cent, and ordinary corrosion can sometimes look much more mysterious in a photograph than it does in person. Also be careful with online listings that show enormous asking prices. A seller can ask any amount for a coin, but an asking price is not evidence that a buyer will actually pay it. Genuine market value is better established through documented sales, recognized auction records, professional grading, and comparison with similar coins. If your coin seems unusual enough to justify professional evaluation, preserve it exactly as you found it. Do not clean it first. Do not try to remove the black color. Do not scrape the surface to see what is underneath. Do not use a magnet as the only proof of composition. Instead, keep the coin protected and allow an experienced professional to examine it properly. A 1943 steel cent can be an excellent example of how history, manufacturing, and collecting all come together in a single object. Even a worn example can tell us about wartime material shortages and the unusual decision to temporarily change America's 1-cent coin. And if a supposedly ordinary dark penny turns out to possess a genuinely rare composition or authenticated minting error, then its story can become far more extraordinary than its appearance initially suggests. So if you have a black, circulated 1943 Lincoln steel wheat penny without a mint mark, take a moment before you decide what it is worth. Hold the coin carefully by the edges and look at it under good lighting. Confirm the date, inspect the area beneath the date, study Lincoln's portrait, and turn the coin over to examine the wheat stalks and lettering. Remember that a Philadelphia 1943 steel cent normally has no mint mark, so the missing letter is not the feature that makes this coin exciting. The real investigation is whether the coin's composition, surfaces, condition, and production characteristics match an ordinary steel cent or reveal something unusual. The black color may simply be the result of decades of environmental exposure and corrosion, especially if the zinc coating has deteriorated. That does not necessarily make the coin rare, but it does give the coin a distinctive appearance and a history worth understanding. If the coin is magnetic,